We are live. Thank you, guys. Hi, guys. Welcome to Zero Chills Creative Cliche. I'm sorry about the voice. Let me just apologize. I had your office last time, but I'm sorry. I could not get an office in time. I know Deepesh will ask me why I didn't talk to him, but hey, that's what happened. So today we have one of the guys I look up to in the advertising industry. His name is Deepesh Ja. He's a cool guy. And yeah, like I said, don't pray. We have Ja Rastafari in the house. So Deepesh, say hi.
Hi everyone, how are you?
Everyone is fine. Now, I think I'll start with the first question. Is that you hired me back in 2016, but officially in 2017. And I'd like to ask you the question that you asked me. So, tell me about yourself.
This is revenge mode for you today, right? You didn't even Okay. I think about myself is I'm a person who lives to observe and understand people. I enjoy watching the emotion of life play out in front of me. So in parties, I'm usually amused by things happening around me, and I mean, what else? I love what I do because I think I had accidentally bumped into advertising as a profession, and I don't think if given a chance, I would undo that mistake. I'd come back here willingly.
Yeah, amazing. Because you're actually an army guy. You're not an advertising guy. I read your history. Where your father told you, you know how to join the army. So tell us, what is an army guy doing in advertising?
Well, how do I tell you? I think the only thing that I have been able to sort of carry forward from whatever my father wanted me to do was to bring the discipline into the profession. I mean, I know people will contest about my sort of sometimes being lazy at work, but what I do is be very thorough about the work, and I think that's the only thing that has helped me sort of survive the chaos of this industry.
Chaos in the industry, but you see, you've just jumped right over the question. For instance, like the first question that I was asked: can creativity be taught? Can you teach someone creativity?
Sorry, Ashur, you'll have to say that again. A lot of noise.
Oh, I'm really sorry. We're asking, can you really teach creativity? Because so many people ask, am I a creative? Can anyone be a creative?
So, it's very interesting. Long back, we had done a workshop for a client. You can't take client names, but I mean, they had asked the same question: is that can anybody be creative? And I had said that if a client can be creative, anybody in this industry can be creative. So there's a very simple sort of barometer to understand creativity. I think creativity as a concept, everyone is creative. Just imagine how creative people get when they are stopped at Alcoblo in the night. We have seen many interviews of people who have shown extreme creativity and ingenuity in trying to get out of that situation. See, so creativity resides in everyone. But when you talk about creativity in the field of advertising, so I mean, that's a different kind of creativity. Here, I mean, you're forcing yourself to, and I think anybody who wants to join advertising needs to sort of understand this, that what you're looking for specifically in advertising is your ingenuity in being able to surprise people by telling them something that they know, but in a manner that they never thought it could be told. And that's the part of creativity in advertising. So,
Yes, continue.
yeah, so did I jump over your question or did I answer it?
No, this one you answered well. So good job, good job. We are getting there. We are warming up. We are warming up. Now,
No,
I read
so
a quote that art is the Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I'm just saying, let me finish that answer. Is that I think you can, I think creativity as a discipline in advertising You come with the raw material, but yes, the industry, I mean, you can teach someone this creativity in the field if you stick around long enough and if you have the staying power.
So someone can actually be taught how to be creative. Yeah.
Yep.
But now, in terms of creativity, where is the line? If we now get into the good stuff, where is the line between creatives and research? Because sometimes I find that the marketers they do a lot of research on people, such that by the time the advert is out, we've lost the gist, we've lost the juice, and now we just have a cool functioning ad. What's your opinion on that?
So I think, how do I say, is that, anybody who's looking for creative delight only in the industry is in for a rude shock, because the industry is at the end of the day, there is there's a KPI to everything that you do. Why are you sending the ad out? What does it need to do? So I think what we do is do a fine sort of balancing act between telling a message creatively and also being able to deliver on a marketing objective, is to either get people to appraise or to buy or to do something that that is the business objective. So I mean, so there are two kinds of, there will always be a place where function will win over form, and in those cases you end up doing at least a good execution job. But there will be times where you have brave marketers, and brave marketers will allow you that freedom to say that, okay, this doesn't have to have all the 10 items that I need to do, but let it do 2 of these and let it do it creatively. So yeah, part of the joy of this industry is also finding those sparks and moments where you can find the right balance between the two.
But then again, how do you find the right balance? I'm asking because most of the time you find that the creative industry has been infiltrated by marketers, if I may so use the term, such that the job is to get the job done. There's no attention to the craft. And I remember it's also an issue that you kept on raising at SCANAD. People are focused more on doing the job to get the job done than to get a good job done.
So I think, this has always been the dilemma between advertising and marketers, is that what is that fine balance? And I think you'll notice even in SCANAD, on some accounts you're allowed that freedom, and on some briefs you're able to crack that, and then on some you end up doing just the right thing. So it's not to say that it's all gloom and doom, and then there's no good work happening. There is good work happening, and you will find that in bits and pieces. But to say that as an industry, that every piece of work that you will do will be pushing the envelope is impractical. So like we always tell people, is that choose your battles. There are some battles where you need to push the envelope. You need to find that opportunity, and sort of on those ones, don't give up.
Okay, interesting. Well, do you find yourself having a lot of time right now at this age that you are, or is it still pedal to the metal?
Time for what?
I'm not saying you're getting old. I'm just saying, like right now you have more time to look after things that you want to do, like hang out with your family more and letting the young guys run the show. Do you have that right now?
So to answer your question, I'll answer that through an anecdote. So when I had just got married back in India, and I was struggling, I was a writer of young Achioya's age, and I had also taken on the responsibility of marriage. And my father then came to visit me for the first time, and he got a bottle of whiskey, and he thought that since I have grown up, I'm earning, he's going to sort of sit across the table and have a whiskey with me in the evenings. He stayed there for 14 days, but unfortunately, none of the 14 days I was able to make it back to home on time, including the weekends, because it was a very hectic period in the work year, and then he went back saying that maybe 12 years, 14 years later, when you're a very senior person, I'll come back and again with a bottle of whiskey and sit down. And he came to Kenya. I think he had come here before COVID. I think about like 4 or 5 years back, and we had a bottle of whiskey. And in the 30 days he was here, I was able to have whiskey with him twice. So in a very long format, nothing changes. Advertising is a very time-consuming career, and I think despite your growth, you will still be doing something that takes up a lot of your time. And yes, do you delegate? Do you let people do their jobs? Of course, you let them do. But will you ever get the time to put your feet up and say that I've got everything sorted? I don't think so. You will never find an advertising creative officer sitting in a golf club on a Wednesday afternoon. I don't think it'll happen in this industry ever.
Maybe it should happen, maybe it's time that it happens.
Sorry?
Oh, maybe it's time that that advertising creative, has some time to go and sit on a golf course and just do things that advertisers will normally not do.
What I always tell advertising people to do is that if you have to really skip office, go and do something else that is very interesting. Watch a movie, watch a play, go watch a debate, listen to spoken word. I mean, if you really have to skip office, go do something that that sort of stimulates your brain, because that's not going to come if you keep sitting at your desk.
Okay, true. There's something that you mentioned about advertising being a very time-consuming career, and something that I've also noticed in the industry is that the culture right now is that most people want to start something of their own, a side business or a full-time business. Has that been something you've considered in your 2+ decades working as a professional in this industry? I promise I won't tell anyone.
No, so let me answer that. There is a cultural part to that answer. Like if you notice, and hustling and side is something that I realized is an opportunity after coming to Kenya, and I realized that there's this great hustling mentality in Kenyans, where I have grown up. I mean, we are brought up with blinders. You pick up one career and you do it very well, and you do that till you're so old that and you can't do anything else anymore. But do I now see it? I think Kenya has had a very positive impact on me. And now like you said very rightly, at my age, it does occur to me. Yes, I mean, gosh, there are so many more opportunities here. But am I going to start anything? No, I don't think so. Because this is a 24-hour job. I mean, and I love doing what I do, where I am right now.
So would you say that is part of the reason why, and I hate to use this term, millennials are not growing fast in the industry, because they keep on shifting. I know people complain that they are not loyal, but you as a person who has hired a lot of young guys to this industry, do you think that is part of the problem? Because if I see most of the ones that come, it's either coming to people of their stature or someone who's a bit older. I don't see a lot of young people, myself included, winning this award.
Very good. I think it's a very good observation. And how do I say this? Is when I had come in 2011 and I had come with the agenda that, we'd work. And I had hired a lot of young people. So we had set out a tweet, and Twitter was not that popular in 2011. But we had sent out a tweet and we'd got about like 20 to 25 candidates who walked into interview in Ogilvy. That was the first agency that I had come. And out of those 20, we had hired a lot of people. And today, if you look at it, I see that actually none of them are in the industry anymore. And I think is it a fault of the generation? Is it a fault of the ability to stick on to one job? Because I think there are a lot of factors in this, because when you join advertising, it's not a very rewarding profession. Financially, because the pay scales do not match anybody who's joining PricewaterhouseCoopers or joining a big corporate. So I think what somebody who joins advertising needs to realize is that there is a certain period of gestation in this industry, because it's not formally taught. And in sort of countries where this is formally taught, you have already invested that time in a college or an institution learning advertising. So when you come out, you're a far more finished product, and therefore when people hire you, you get better salaries. But when it is taught at the job, you need to, as an individual, invest that time into advertising and say that, once those 4 or 5 years are through, I will start sort of making the money that is due to me, and that's when you will start firing. So and that period is depending on how bright and how sharp you are. It can be anything between 2 to 5 years, not longer than that. After 5 years, if you're still hacking it, you're in the wrong place. So I think you should give the industry that time. And if you quit before that, I have seen people switch over into different channels of media, whether it is radio or television or content, and then they circle back because you've not really sharpened the skill. And I think that's in my opinion what it takes to make it in advertising, and have that patience and give it that time.
Interesting things that you brought up. And going back, and I put this as a scenario, because say for instance, when you're starting out in advertising back in 1995, I'm sure you had mentors. But right now that we are all at home with this COVID period, and like you said, this is a period, advertising is something that you have to learn on the job, yeah? Like you told me when I was joining, this is something that you have to be there and so on. But so far, at this time, I find that there is a lack of mentorship in the industry. And I know you might say it's for the lack of trying. Why are you not approaching this established people in the industry? But sometimes when you approach them, they're either too busy or unavailable. So there's a disconnect, and I want to know what yourself you're doing about that.
I think it's unfortunately as an industry, advertising has taken a lot of pressure off the first thing that hits both the marketing is the budget, and advertising is at the brunt of it. So for the last 3-4 years, the industry has not really been at its peak in terms of where the whole market is going. But once if the industry has that time, then people have that time. If the industry doesn't have that pressure, then people have that time, and that's the time that people take to to sort of coach and educate people. But right now, most of the agencies it's like everybody's shoulders to the wheel, and we are pushing this thing forward. So yes, do you feel guilty you've not had the time to coach and train people by taking out time aside for it? Yes. Do people learn on the job while you're working with them? That is an yes too. So it's not a black and white answer. It's about saying that can there be more formal training, coaching within the institute, within the agencies? Yes, there is, and I think we've had to sacrifice that in the last few years because of the business pressures. But I think as things are beginning to look up, I think we'll build that time into it, and work with the young and train them. And it's not just the individual agencies. If you look at it, it is also a culture that needs to be present in the industry. So, for example, the various organizations and institutions that are societies and that function to work with universities. Part of that training and education also comes by dipping into that pool for the youngsters and learning from there.
Okay, That's an interesting perspective you've brought, because my next question is actually, do you see a shift in this industry so far, and where is it pointing to, and how can farmers stay ahead?
So shift in the industry in what terms?
In terms of course, I hate to repeat the cliche that things are changing. The world, the way we know it, is really ending. And like you said, right now we are all working from home, especially most advertising agencies. And there's that lack of one-on-one interaction, where most guys are moving now either in-house marketing or they're starting their freelance gigs or whatever. And maybe just from an insider point of view, how has this affected the business? What is happening now to this creative talent that is being scattered all over the place rather than being solidified in one area?
So I think if I understand your question correctly, it is about, you've said two things. One is, what is the future of the industry in Kenya? Do I get that right in terms of
Yes.
Sure. So, and the other, if I understand it correctly, and the first part of your question was about how is the industry changing, and in terms of where it is headed. So, I mean, the honest answer to that is that this advertising has been a constantly changing industry for the last 100 years, 120 years since it's been active, and every time there is a curve that advertising crosses. People say that, hey, the car's going to go off rails, things are going to come off. Nothing goes off. Everything keeps moving. It's people who don't adapt fall off. People who do stay on the rails. And I think that answers the question for the industry. And people said that, like when, like the whole sort of digital sort of inclusion in terms of media and its popularity came, that, things will not change. I think storytelling has never changed, and it has stayed true. We've found newer formats of doing it. We've found technology to say it. But, a creative person sort of moves with the changes. And the industry, they'd say that, creative agencies will die, smaller shops will happen. Smaller shops did happen, but now they're absorbed into the bigger shops. And it's gone on like this forever. I mean, media used to be within agencies, media has now become, and then there's a certain part of creativity that is coming into media now, and they are sort of teaming up again with traditional agencies. So yeah, so I mean, thinking, ideation is something that is always going to stay true to the industry, and any professional who's true to that is going to evolve with the times. So that answers your first part of the question. The second part of the question is spin-offs. I think this is, how do I say, this is very cyclic in every market. So there's a time, and this is across various markets. You will find there was a time for big agencies in New York where everybody was on Madison Avenue. And then there came a time that everybody from Madison Avenue went over to different small states and they opened small shops. And over a period of 10 years, not many of the shops survived. And only a few strong names have stayed within those shops that opened. And they have continued to be, I mean, part of larger groups now. They have sold over and bought. So yes, what's interesting about smaller shops and creative opening is that, for me, that is very good news. Because when people do that, is that it sort of really puts creativity at the forefront rather than business. And people try and buy better ideas, and it actually takes and lifts the standard of the work in the market. And it pushes and challenges even marketers to think of the quality of the work first. And I think that's always a good news. And then it's a cycle. There will be spin-offs, they'll come together, they will form bigger stuff, and then they will spin off and form again. And that's the life cycle of advertising and agencies in almost every market.
Okay. Now, it's interesting that you brought about life cycles. I was reading this quote by Toffler, who was saying that the illiterate of the 21st century will be not those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn and relearn. And just from your time in the industry, I'd like to know what you've learned, what you've unlearned, and what you've had to relearn.
I think what have I? Gosh, that noise. What have I learned? I think I have learned, the first thing that I have learned is read all the data, understand the client brief, but always trust your gut as a creative person. And I think time and again that has proved itself right, because there can be a lot of sort of statistics presented to you, but the reason nobody is able to turn those statistics into advertising is because there is the subconscious mind that attacks that data and that gives you the solution by reading and interpreting it. And I think that is what you call gut instinct. And I've learned that, over and over again, you have to trust yourself when you're taking a decision and standing by what you believe in. And that is one thing that I have learned. What I have unlearned is, I think one of the biggest things as a creative person in advertising is the imposter syndrome. So you have to unlearn that and that is why you have to believe in what you do. And the other thing that you have to very strongly unlearn is preconceived notions. And as a creative person, what I think the biggest thing that I have unlearned is ego has no place. And I think the more people are able to dissociate yourself from being emotionally wedded to your work. I said you should be rationally and trust your instinct, but you should not be wedded to your work where emotion gets in the way. So there are times, yes, you get passionate about your work, but I think it leads you to places that sort of take that don't lead to growth. So you have to really unlearn to look at the work through the lens of ego, and the sooner you drop it, I think the more you grow, and you're able to understand and be open yourself to ideas that are coming from other people.
Okay, interesting. There's something you said about trusting your gut, which makes me wonder, because this was something I was also trying to conceive for myself. Is advertising a philosophy or a psychology, or rather is it science or an art? Because most of the time I see we are focused on the science of the advertising but not the arts. What's your opinion?
You see, advertising is not an either or. Advertising is it's a science and an art, and I think that's where people, that's the gap through which people fall when they say that if I pick one side, I'll be able to do advertising. Well, you cannot. So if I say I'm going to be purely a creative person and I don't understand the business side of it, then you are never going to be a good advertising person. You may be a good art director, you may be a good copywriter, you may end up being a very good sort of craftsman or a craftsperson by wordsmithing or doing some great art, but you'll never truly understand advertising. So there's a lovely science to it, and that science is also very, very interesting and captivating, because there are consumer habits that you need to understand to be able to really tap into how you can sell it to them. That's the science of advertising. And then the art of advertising is then when you let loose and you say that I figured out what to say, I have figured out how to say. Now it's the expression of it, your choice of words, your choice of design, your choice of medium or the right technology through which to land it. I mean, like, why does this have to be a headline? Can't it be a lovely augmented reality experience? So those kind of things is what makes the art and your right brain come alive. And then there is a left brain which requires to be fed before your right brain can kick in.
Right brains and left brains. I've never truly been sold on that fact of right brains and left brains. But I'd like to know, so far, what has been your biggest revelation in this industry, and how has it affected the way you work?
Biggest what? Biggest what?
Biggest revelation. Biggest revelation.
Revelation. Biggest revelation. My biggest revelation. I think my biggest revelation has been no 2 days are alike. No two jobs are alike. No two briefs are alike. No two people are alike. No two clients are alike. And 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 I think that has led to, I think, the giant revelation, which is that um, your last good work is your last good work, and it's not going to be relevant tomorrow. So every day you have to walk up, you have to rock up and create your best thing today. So advertising is very unforgiving that way. I mean, you had something that you did 5 years back that was good. That was 5 years back. It's not relevant anymore. Can't hear you.
I like to know, yeah, this Zoom mic is in an Yaibisha. It's making me look old. I'd like to know what has been, because you're saying no two briefs are alike, and I'd like to know that's one time that maybe you thought, like how you could have an idea for this campaign, but the client says no, but then you say this is a good idea, so you transfer it to the next campaign. Has that ever occurred to you?
I mean, are you saying that if you one can, recycle ideas?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I cut to the chase there. So yeah, I mean, um, there have been times where you've presented what seemed like the best sort of creative solution and a business solution to a client, and they've not seen the value of that. And like I've always told people, and people have told me, is that don't throw away a good idea because you've had a bad client or a bad meeting. Or it's just bad timing, because sometimes a good idea, I mean, its time may not have come, so you hold on to it. And there has been, I can't tell you specifically the idea, but there have been many a time where you've taken that idea, you've sold it to a client and tried to sell it to a client, it hasn't worked, you walked away, and 2 years later somebody had said, you hear a brief and you say, what about this one? And they say, of course, make it. And it has happened. It has happened. I mean, if I have to take an instance, I mean, there's a film that we had done for, surprisingly, for a telecom. We had written a film, and the telecom, the mobile phone service provider, I mean, they didn't buy the film. And surprisingly, a brief came for a bank, and it almost seemed like the two can work. Just out of having fun, I just presented the script and said, what do you think? And they did this brilliantly, and the film got made. I think it was for, it was for a bank in Kenya.
Johnny is asking what does a CD need most to be successful. I forgot to tell the people that they can ask their questions. I was just so excited to get into my list of questions. This is me being selfish. So let me remove my ego away from this discussion. So if you have any questions, please ask Deepesh. He's here for a limited time. Now, Deepesh, please, what does a CD need most to be successful?
So it's interesting. I think if you ask me, when somebody says what does a CD need to be successful, the first thing that comes to mind is a very good team. A CD needs an extremely good team of handpicked people he can trust or she can trust to be successful. Because when you're a writer, you're only as good or bad as your work. But as a creative director who's heading an agency, you are as good or as bad as the people in your team.
So yeah, you're only as good as your team. Now, speaking of teams, do you have a working team? And don't you think that maybe if as a CD playing favorites in the agency leads to low morale?
Playing favorites as creative team.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's applicable to any organization. But I mean, if you specifically ask, what happens in the creative field, very interestingly, is that you know, uh, and you have to have worked in this industry to understand this. Is that work starts going to people who are very good, and you automatically gravitate towards people who seem to be finding the solutions, coming up with answers. So it's not a game of favorites in an advertising agency as it is about going to the person uh, who's coming up with solutions. So that person ends up being always being sort of called into meetings or asked for solutions because they have those solutions. So favorites in advertising is a game of talent. Is the more talented you are, the more likely it is that people are going to pick on you and say, "Come, my friend, I've got something. Do you have 5 minutes?" So that's how it happens in advertising.
Okay. Now, what has been your biggest creative challenge so far in your career? The one that you say, well, upper, this one is tough.
Challenges. I mean, gosh, when you get to my age, you had so many challenges that stop sort of bothering you. So I think, yeah, challenges. Yes, I think in terms of, I'm trying to think, yes, as an institutional challenge, as a personal challenge. Hmm. Yeah, I think what I can say is one of my biggest sort of challenges was when I chose to come to Kenya to work. Mm, it 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 was a huge learning curve because the rules that apply in one country don't apply in the other in terms of work culture, in terms of understanding the culture of the people that you're creating the work for. And I think I was lucky in that sense is that uh, I've always or I've had the ability to uh, or I've had the good fortune to have sort of been surrounded um, by the right team that they took me through that hump of learning, and they did it quite well. Because if they hadn't, then I don't think I'd have survived as a creative person in Kenya.
Now, speaking of creative teams, you are hired as a creative to bring something different to the table. But you also find that most of the time when you work somewhere for so long, you start thinking like everyone else, hard mentality, or you start thinking alike. How then do you, as a creative, remain ahead of the curve? Because there's that you fall into the system. Eventually, the system wins, and you start thinking alike. So such that people will say this ad comes from a certain person, this ad comes from a certain person. How then do you maintain that creativity or that something new every time that you're producing work?
Yeah, I think what you have to do is keep your eyes and ears really open. So I think good advertising doesn't come from just understanding how other people are producing good advertising. Good advertising also comes from how aware you are of your surroundings, what's happening in culture. I mean, what are the jokes? What are the memes? What's the music? What's the art scene? I mean, and the more you look into that, you realize that you can get out of the trap of of being similar in work, and more so what is happening. And if anybody is a keen observer of advertising, is that uh, more and more advertising is not looking like advertising anymore, and that's the attempt of advertising. And I think if people understand that conceptually, then they'll understand that to stay ahead of the curve, you have to be absolutely sort of soaked in popular culture. And I don't think anybody who's under 25 should have a problem with that.
Yeah, luckily I'm not under 25 anymore. feel like an old man. Now, Deepesh, is it ever appropriate for design to overrule data, and why? Maybe if you give us a for instance. No, the data is saying this, but the design is like, this is a dope as design. My question is stemming from the fact that I see a lot of, and we had this discussion last week as well. I see a lot of client-directed ads out here, which is just sad, especially that one from Team Doom, which says "you kufia toa." I really hate that ad, and I don't know. Are we not having enough gatekeepers in the industry who can, keep everyone on toes, because the work that is coming out?
So rule rule number one in advertising is never diss another client's advertising. They may end up being your client. So and memories are very long. So so I think when you say data and design, uh, I think it, like I said very earlier on, is that if you sometimes read data very literally, you'll end up doing what the consumer is dictating you to do. Whereas if you pull back from the data and you look at it interestingly, you may create something that the consumer has not said. And there's a very nice example of reading data that somebody had said in World War II. I think it was the Americans or the British who commissioned a research to see where their planes, their bombers were being shot in. So they created a map, and the red dots represented where which parts of the plane were being shot at by all the bombers that came back with bullet holes. And so they asked that those areas need to be beefed up and they need to put more armor there so that those bullets don't penetrate that. There's a guy who read the data and he said that you're getting it all wrong, because the bombers that came home, they don't need the armor where the bullet holes were. The ones that come back where you don't see the red dots are the ones that you need to reinforce, because those are fatal bullet holes and they are not represented in the data. So do you see? It's how you read data is what leads to better insights. And sometimes when people literally read data, you are reinforcing things that don't need to be reinforced.
Reinforcing things that don't need to be reinforced. But like you said, like I remember when you're having this discussion about popular culture and the new generation, like how young people now are moving towards memes and these new forms of advertising like TikTok. But these are now parts of our lives. And the fact that as an advertiser, as a creative, you need to find ways to find a way to come into people's lives like this. Is there a point where now the ethical question comes in? How much is too much? Because sometimes I'm doing something on TikTok and then an ad pops up or something just pops up and I'm like, I don't need this now. I see a lot of advertising people putting ad blockers on their laptops or on their phones. And it's a question of now ethics versus my job. Where is that line and who draws that line?
So I think the way to answer it, and I think referring to it in the question before, is that the trend of advertising is not to look like advertising anymore. And what has happened is that a lot of brands get into social channels and try and be present on social channels without understanding the codes of that channel. So for instance, a lot of people went to Instagram because their parents started joining Facebook, and when their parents started joining Instagram, they started moving to Snapchat. They started moving to TikTok, to other places where the parents were not there. So if you follow the trend, is exactly how youth react to parents is the way consumers react to advertising. Is where they see advertising, they go to a non-advertising channel. So therefore, good advertising is about understanding the code of that channel. And there are brilliant examples of brands that have understood codes of social channels and done their advertising, which is loved by the people on that channel, because they don't resist the ads, because they're absolutely enjoying or partaking in the fun of that. Before today, everything became a challenge on TikTok. There were certain brands like Chipotle in America, which what they did was they totally understood TikTok as a medium, and they used it for, and they stayed on top of the trend curve. And therefore, the consumers on TikTok did not see Chipotle as an intrusive ad. It was something that they enjoyed while they were doing. So you can't be on TikTok and have a soap bar with saying "I'll kill 99% germs." It needs to be said differently. It needs to be said in the language of the channel that you're in. You cannot take something that works in print and put it on a social channel where you are consuming that media very differently. So to answer your question, it is intrusive if you make it to be intrusive. It is inclusive if you understand the code of that channel that you're in. And then it is fun.
Let's talk about something else that you had mentioned earlier about storytelling. And basically you had said that advertising is basically about telling the human story and how people relate to this human story, which is what sometimes is missing in the way we tell our stories, or the way we tell our brand, or the way we advertise our products. Now, for instance, if you are to come up with an ad, because sometimes I think, say you have no budget, but you still want to tell a story. How then you as a young creative, the client is on your neck. You have to do this job by a certain period of time, but you really want to tell a story that will grip in more people. Like you said, it has to be inclusive to the way they live their lives, the way they do their stuff. How do you tell this advertising stories in such a way that me, as a consumer who is watching, I know I want to say, I want to be part of that?
Okay. I'm trying to sort of understand is that, how do you tackle a particular brief, or is it about storytelling?
No. Storytelling. Forget about the brief, for instance. Remember when you are having this chat about, you say, the world might change, but eventually the stories will remain. Because essentially how we communicate as human beings is through stories.
Correct. When you talk about storytelling, is that every brand has a narrative, and that narrative is something that you continue regardless of the channel that you're in. But if you break it down further, is that like so when people say social channels are not long format storytelling, yes, they are still storytelling. So if you look at the Burger King, the moldy burger, in which they put up a burger for like 14 days and they showed mold and mildew and everything and fungus growing on it. It's a very captivating story. They were telling you a story of how this burger doesn't have preservatives, as opposed to, they were taking on another popular food chain, McDonald's, who's been accused of putting preservatives in their food. So they said ours is fresh and natural, and it goes bad very fast. So that is why we serve it fresh. And so what they did was put the burger up, and on time lapse, you could see the burger become bad in front of your eyes. That's absolutely powerful storytelling. So you see, storytelling is not about just saying that I'll write a TVC. Television commercial is one form of storytelling. How do you tell stories on Twitter? I mean, I think the biggest learning is that how certain news channels they quickly adapted to social news telling. So investigative journalism used to be long editorial articles. BBC cracked this, and they did it so well. They used Twitter threads to absolutely do investigative journalism, and they broke down stories into, when there were still 164 characters, and they still did it very well and had captive audiences.
Okay. We're almost coming to the end of our show. It's been 49 minutes. I don't know where all that time went. But Johnny is asking, how do you stay sharp as a
creative? To stay sharp as a creative, I mean, as the metaphor goes, you still have to put yourself on the whetstone every day. You have to really absorb everything around you, understand the trends, and I think if you do that, if you're aware and you're totally keen and you love doing what you do, Love your music, love your art, love your writing, read some books, watch some movies, see some competitors work, do everything. You get envious, um, do the usual, let loose, travel. I mean, you have to do a lot of things to be sharp as creative. I mean, if you really think that just sitting just behind the computer, you're going to stay sharp as a creative, it never happens. You have to sort of let your mind go and wander to be a sharp creative person. I think it's a mistake most people make is that they don't let their mind have time to wander. Some people are very good, they let their mind wander. So it's a question of finding the right balance.
I think you cracked a joke and I missed it because the internet was bad. So do you mind repeating for me? I will laugh.
No, no. I mean, I was just saying that. I mean, one of the so apart from doing everything that you have to do, I said you have to give yourself enough time to let your mind wander, to let it give it some time to walk away from things. And I think people sometimes make that mistake of not giving that time, their mind little sort of space to wander, because that's what keeps you sharp is when you let it go. And I was saying that some people let their minds wander quite a lot, and so it is a question of balance.
Yes, I don't want to know where it wanders to because I'm sure you'll take me somewhere I don't want to go. and you also wonder a lot in terms of I see you taking a lot of hikes, maybe to Mount Kenya and building a lot of things. And uh, maybe I cannot afford that. How else can I wonder? Apart from the usual, apart from the usual that you should not say because this is a public show.
No, I think you find a good place to wander to. I mean, you can wander up in the hills. You can pick up a book and read it in whichever form. You can pick it up on your Kindle. You can pick up a physical book. I think when you say you let your mind wander, it is not just physical spaces. It's just let it go into a space that that allows it to breathe.
Remind me. So, right now you have a lot of creative experience and a lot of managerial experience. And for a young person wanting to rise through the ranks, what does it take apart from putting in the hard work? I know it also involves a lot of politics, if I may say. And to get there, you need to do a lot of things. And don't give me the answer that I can get on Google Wikipedia. Give me the real facts. If I want to become a creative director today, what do I need to do?
So I think I'll say the most obvious thing that people don't but see but don't say. I think you've got to be very selfish. You have to be very selfish in terms of valuing what you do. And if you lose that, I don't think you'll ever rise because you know at the end of the day, despite everything, the dynamics around you, um, I mean, what remains undeniably true is the work that you put on the table, and you have to be extremely focused to put it there. It takes a lot out of you, uh, but people who've done well understand this code very well. Is it's work that comes first, nothing else. Nothing really comes before that.
It's the work that comes first. Now, tying into that question, you find that there are not, or rather, there are not a lot of female creatives. And even if we check about the management, we don't find a lot of female creatives leading these boards or leading the creative journey. Is it from where you sit? Is it from a lack of female creative who are talented, or is it from a lack of the work, or from where you sit? How do you see it?
I think I have found it very surprising is that like in Kenya specifically, is that I have found that there are very few women creative directors. I mean, coming from India, we've always had not a very fair balance when we started out, but now, if you look at it, there is a way. There's a good balance between women and men in the industry. What I find interesting in the Kenyan industry is that you'll find a lot of the account management side, and even the accounts team, if people realize in their agencies, whichever agencies they work for, is usually a lot of women, but somehow a few have switch over to creative, and that's interesting. But I see that trend changing now, and we don't have people in senior positions except a few. But I think the young and mid-level writers that exist in the industry now are being fairly represented as women, and I think the sooner they rise through the ranks, you'll find that this balance will have shifted in their favor.
If you could live life right now, like, of course I'm praying for your long term because there are some things you owe me. What would be your what would be your greatest achievement? What would be your memento mori that when people say this is Deepesh was here, this is what they show us?
I always stick by the rule that my mentor had taught me, is that I think the evolution of a creative person is you create an ad and you're remembered for the ad, then you create a campaign and you're remembered for that campaign, then you create a brand and you're remembered for that brand, the guy who created that. And as you grow, then you create an agency, which is a culture. As a creative person, is that you created a culture, and then after that, the ultimate evolution of a creative person is to leave behind a legacy of having created people who carry on the good work and do better than they had. So I think my ultimate aim is, I think I'm in the last two of that cycle, is to be able to create an agency culture that is remembered, and to create a set of people in Kenya who can think of me fondly and say that we work together.
We think of you fondly. We do. Well, as we come to a close, part of your job as a creative director is asking the right questions. Yes. So I wanted to ask me one question right now.
Oh, ask you the right question. You wanted to step out to discover yourself. I hope you are on your way to. I hope you're on your way to discover yourself.
I told you that in private, but now if you are airing that line in public, yes, I'm on my way. I am on my way to discovering myself. But wouldn't you say, like, Deepesh, you've been in this industry for 20-something years, which is just almost among the number of years I've been alive. Don't you think that it's good for a creative to take a break? You never took a break?
No, as in like from the industry, never. But I guess I do occasionally, like I tell you, take breaks to give the mind rest, and I think you should do that regularly.
But say, like you've done, maybe like you're talking about letting your mind wander and just saying, is this the right space? Is this the right thing? Am I doing the right arts? Am I going to live the right agency culture? Because I was talking to some other guy, and he told me that when I was around maybe 35, things were just over, and then he said, you know what, I'm taking a break. And he left, and he came back and he started winning awards. Maybe that was his process, or rather, now what is your process? How?
I'm able to, like personally, I have the ability to detach myself from, something that is a negative cycle and pull back out of it and throw myself back right in. So I prefer doing it while I'm at the job than walking away to do it.
Now, time is something that it's. I remember when we met the other time, you told me that if anything that you could take back is time, but we all know that time is something that once it's wasted, you can never get back. And as we are coming to a close on our 1 hour time, I want to know that time that you wasted. what was that time that you wasted on something that you wish was a big lesson that you said if you ever meet another young man or another young girl out there, you tell them, don't waste your time doing this.
The only advice that I can give to people is that I think we spend, not all of us, I've seen everybody is built differently, but if you are ever in a phase in your life that you have self-doubt, don't do it, because I think that is a period of your time that will never come back, and that could have been sort of put to use much better. So yeah, there was a phase even in my career, when I was in between being junior, and sort of rising to mid senior, where I had a lot of self doubt in terms of, am I capable? Will I be able to do this? Am I worth this? And I think those 3 or 4 years is something that I feel I could have taken back and just thrown myself into it fully. So that's the only advice I would give, is that if you ever have a moment of self-doubt, don't spend a minute there, because it's just going to be completely wasted time.
Amazing. So whatever you want to do, don't self-doubt yourself. Finally, I think a preacher. I've started repeating myself. But before I let you go, is there a question that you want to ask me? This sounds like it's a romantic movie. Or if I'm taken, or rather, let me rephrase the question. Perspective. Is there a question I should have asked that I have not asked?
No, I think I'm very pleasantly surprised by your maturity, Ashwaya. So good show.
Wow, Deepesh, wow. This is the part where you sell me. You say like, you say good things about the people you work with.
No, I think
yes.
I think it's a good point. Is that I think at the end of the day, also is I think the most important thing is people don't realize when they sort of see or meet or talk about creativity or creative people in advertising is that creativity is the end of a process. And so when you ask me the question, there's science and art. Creative, yes, is the tip of the sword, but there's a whole sword that's behind it to make it effective. And I think very few creative people have shown or have the opportunity to shine when they are not backed by an entire set of thinking minds that sort of understand, decode the problem, and then present you with the simplicity to go and just create the work that you need to create. So I think there's a lot of unsung heroes in advertising, and while the focus is on creative, there's a great amount of back end that allows this to happen. So I think no subject of creativity in advertising is complete without thanking the people who make that happen.
I think if I add anything more, I'll be subtracting. So I think we leave it at that. But before I let you go, I swear this is the last one. Would you be open? Because I'm sure a lot of young people ask me, I'm looking for a mentor. I've seen this guy, but I don't know how to approach him. Are you open to mentoring these young people?
Absolutely. And I think that is something that I would love to do. So if there's anybody who wants me to take out some time, I can take out some time and work with these people.
Amazing, boss. I will send them your LinkedIn profile, because there you said you're open for coffee and pro bono work. I have some pro bono work that I wanted to help us out with. But thank you so much for watching. That was Deepesh Jha. I don't know if he has anything else he has to say to someone or to anyone. In case no. So
all right.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for tuning in. Yes. See you next Friday when we have another guest. Thank you, Rita. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you, everyone who tuned in today. I think we'll see you next Friday. Of course, I'll share his LinkedIn profile. his email address, but not his phone number. You know, there's some people wanting your phone number. Watakutafuta wenyewe. Thank you guys. See you next Friday.
All right. Bye bye.